Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode all about the brain. Today, we're going to talk about the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, and how these two wonderful parts of our one amazing brain work and why it's so important that we nurture each side. I'm Dr. Celia Corbo, functional health practitioner, licensed chiropractor, and entrepreneur, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you all that I know about the brain today. But before I do, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It keeps my content going for you guys. And also leave a comment if you want me to talk about something so I know what you want to hear. Let's get started. So the brain is, I would say, probably the most amazing structure in this entire world. It is the structure that controls every single thing that our bodies do. And we don't even know entirely what it does. We have an idea, but there are so many mysteries about the brain. But one mystery and one thing that I want to talk about today are the two hemispheres. It's not so much a mystery anymore. A lot of research has been done in this field, analyzing the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And that's what I want to share with you today. When we are developing in utero and when we are born, the right hemisphere or the right side of our brain is growing and developing first. The right hemisphere is usually seen among the masses as this hemisphere of creativity, artistic, visual. And that is true to some degree, but it also isn't true because it's not just art. What the right hemisphere is responsible for doing, it's responsible for looking at the big picture of something. So for example, if you were in nature and you were looking at a forest, the right hemisphere would see that forest, would see the trees and the sky. Maybe there's a lake there, but it's looking at the entire picture that's in front of you. And because this is the first hemisphere to develop, that's why when we're interacting with babies or young children up until the age of 2, we want to use a lot of visuals and imagery and maybe making a funny face. It makes them laugh. They're interacting with you through visuals. But if you were to sit down with a baby and read a book to them, I mean, you would put them to sleep, right? They just don't understand the same way. It's not the same interaction. And that's because that would be the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is all about logic. It's all about analyzing and the nitty gritty details of things. Usually among the masses, it's seen as your science brain, your logical or analytical brain. Again, that's not wrong, but that's not entirely correct. So going back to my nature scene that I just portrayed out for you with the trees and the sky and the lake, that's your right hemisphere. But then your left hemisphere would look at the trees in the landscape and be like, well, that's a maple, that's a birch, that's an oak, that's a pine. And it would start to get really nitty gritty about the details of that picture. And that's because the left brain is all about logic. It's all about reasoning and it's all about looking at something in detail. Now, when we are babies and when you are interacting with a baby or an infant up until the age of 2, like I just mentioned, it's all right hemisphere. That right hemisphere is taking over, it's developing, it's growing. And that's why a lot of automatic functions in the body can take place and we have control or somewhat of a control over that. But at the age of 2, the left hemisphere starts to join the picture. And that's why we call it the terrible twos, because that's when the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere start to interact with each other. And we're starting to put logic in the world of imagery and visualization and all these things that were creative. We're now starting to analyze. And some babies and infants, they can't even handle that properly. And that's why there's a lot of temper tantrums and there's a lot of having to explain and use your words and teach these babies and these children, this is why we do this. This is why we can't have candy before dinner. This is why you're trying to guide them, but you're trying to provide reason to that left side of the brain because before they didn't understand that reason because the left hemisphere wasn't yet developed. But the really amazing thing between these two hemispheres when they're talking to each other is that the brain actually works in an inhibitory way. So your right hemisphere is trying to control and make sure that the left hemisphere doesn't go crazy and doesn't get into what we call an escape. So it's trying to inhibit the left hemisphere from going into that escape mode and going and running wild. But the reality of the fact is, from the age of 3 until the age of 6, the right and the left hemisphere are developing together. And then as soon as a child enters into a school system or some kind of an institutionalized system for learning, the left hemisphere starts to develop way faster, and it does start to go a little crazy because we're nurturing the IQ, the intellectual, and not the EQ, the emotional, which is the right brain. The school system, not all school systems, but the majority of the school systems are very much focused on the analytical, the logical, the mathematical, the science, the reasoning. And that's not a bad thing, but that's really, really nurturing the left hemisphere. And then we have art and music. But again, it's the way that the system is constructed where we can nurture the right side, but again, the way that it's taught, the way that it's educated is a very left brain type of system. And what ends up happening when we nurture that left hemisphere a little bit too much is it does start to go into an escape mode. And what we notice is we notice a lot of anxiety. We notice a lot of low frequency emotions, possibly depression, lots of stress. We possibly could even see some immune system dysfunction as well. Because remember, the right hemisphere is the master. It was the first to develop, and it regulates and modulates the left hemisphere. But if we're not nurturing the right hemisphere and we're not telling it to control the left hemisphere because we're too much in our left brain, then we're not going to have a very balanced body function, and we're going to have a very imbalanced and diseased type of way that we function in total. So when it comes to nurturing that right side of the brain, it does come down to making sure that we play outside, even as adults. What is it that enables us to want to play and want to tap into that inner child of us where we can visualize, we can have imagery, we can see the world for what it is as opposed to analyzing all of the details? And then when it comes to the right side of the brain, it's also about how our body functions. So one of the wonderful tests that I love to give a lot of my patients and clients is the burp test. And this actually tests how much stomach acid we have, because stomach acid production is a very right brain type of situation. And if we have low stomach acid and we can't break down our foods very well, that means we're not absorbing all of our nutrients. That means we're not giving our body the fuel that it needs in order to survive and thrive and heal. And that is a right brain function. So even the foods that we eat control how our brain functions as well. If we're just going to keep eating sugar and fast foods and refined carbohydrates, we're not getting the fuel that we need. We're not producing all of these healthy biochemical reactions in our body that are facilitated by the right hemisphere. And therefore, if we don't need to produce stomach acid, we're not going to need to activate that right hemisphere in order to do so. So eating things like citrus, vinegar in your salad, marinating your meat in vinegar as well, taking your digestive enzymes to help break down your food and produce and help your body produce more stomach acid are things that are wonderful to help with right brain function. And these are things that you would never even associate with the brain. But another really cool function about the right hemisphere is posture. So I'm a chiropractor, as I mentioned, and a lot of the reason why people come to see me is because they have poor posture. Your posture is not poor. It's your right hemisphere that is not working at its optimal, because again, we haven't nurtured the right hemisphere. We're only nurturing the left hemisphere in our society with all of the analyticals that we have to do for work and school and all of the stress that we're under, possibly depression and anxiety, and posture will take a hit because posture is located within the right hemisphere. and your muscles that are responsible for defying gravity and keeping you upright, that is in your right hemisphere. So when I see someone with poor posture, a very rounded back, or they're jutting their head out too forward, that tells me that the right hemisphere is not as active and the left is too much in what we call that escape. It's running rampant, and we need to bring it back in. We need to modulate it and turn that right hemisphere on more. And a wonderful way to do that physically, like I mentioned, is through play and through exercise, but also through chiropractic adjustments. A lot of people think that chiropractic adjustments is just about getting your back cracked and reducing your pain and making you feel better and having better biomechanical function and movement. But that's not necessarily true. There has been research to prove that when you go get your neck adjusted and your back adjusted, it actually activates what we call the prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain. And this is what makes us human. This is the area that's responsible for personality, decision making, self-discipline, judgment, all of the things that make you human is right here. And that gets activated when you go in for your spinal adjustments with your chiropractor, given that that's the focus and they know that they're doing that as well, right? Because a lot of chiropractors actually don't know that. It's all in the literature though, honestly. If you just do a nice Google Scholar or PubMed search and look this up, you will find it. It is amazing to read because it's like, wow, who would have thought that getting your neck adjusted, your back adjusted affected your brain? And I see it instantaneously when I have a patient, and I take pictures of my patients, mind you, because we don't see progress if we don't track it. So I take my pictures of my patients, I look at their posture, I'm seeing all of these patterns that indicate to me that right brain is not turned on very well. It's not telling the left brain to be quiet. And then as soon as we get them adjusted, we take another picture and we see the difference. It's subtle, mind you, because we have a lot of work to do. This has been a lot of years built up, but you see immediately the shoulders are more level, the head is not tilted. All these things, all these patterns are just really fascinating to see because we've activated the brain. We've activated that right hemisphere, that prefrontal cortex that makes us more human. And the research does show that that prefrontal cortex for better decision making, better reasoning, better judgment, a better personality stays illuminated for up to a week. So getting an adjustment is not just for your body, it's for your mind, it's for your brain as well. Because not saying if you don't get adjusted, but if you don't nurture the right side of your brain, again, like I mentioned, that left hemisphere is going to go crazy. It's going to go wild. And we don't want that because that's how dis-ease starts. And I'll get into the male and female brain just a little bit here because we do have differences between the two brains, biological male, biological female. And really, when we get too much in our left brain, that's when we start to see disease, like I just mentioned. And in men, we'll start to notice movement disorders. So we'll start to see tremors. We'll start to see things like Parkinson's or more of a shuffled gait or Tourette's, possibly even. And in women who have a left brain escape or too much activity in the left brain, we see more personality disorders. We see schizophrenia, we see bipolar, we see multiple personality disorders, we see multiple sclerosis. That's a huge one for women. And these are not by chance. Now, not to say that these disorders cannot happen in women and men. We can see movement disorders in women. We can see personality disorders in men. But it's more common that in those genders, these are the things that we're noticing a little bit more when it comes to left brain escape and body dysfunction and dis-ease. So what I really want to get into now is how do we nurture the right hemisphere a little bit more? I just mentioned again that we have play, we have spinal adjustments, the foods that we eat. So eating vinegar and citrus, well, not eating vinegar, but putting it on your salad, marinating your meats in vinegar. So it's already almost broken down. So your stomach acid can start to build up again and it can start to break down all of the foods that enter into the stomach. So we have proper absorption of these nutrients within our bodies for healing and thriving and surviving. But also emotional, being present, that's a very right brain function because When our left brain starts to go a little crazy, we start to make up stories. For example, you have a colleague at work or a coworker, and they said something to you, and you've just locked in on that one phrase that they said. And you're just like, what did they mean by that? Why would they say something like, do they not like me? Like what's going on? We start to make up this story in our brain. This story which is usually not a positive story. It's usually a lower vibration type story because that's the way our brain is wired. Our brain is wired to survive and to be comfortable. And if we're happy and positive all the time, then we're more vulnerable to attack. We're more vulnerable to something that could bring us down. So we're always on the alert naturally and as a default. So it takes a lot of training to be positive and to be optimistic and to be happy and joyful. It takes a lot because that's a very right brain function. And like I mentioned in this video, we've been nurturing our left brain for so many years. So when we get caught in that story that we've just made up or that our left brain has made up, we're kind of like, well, what the heck now? We have to get out of it, right? We can't dwell. We can't stay in this state of guilt, fear, confusion, and anger. We want to get out of that. Our brain wants to be healthy. Our body wants to be healthy. But if you're going to stay trapped in those emotions of guilt, fear, confusion, and resentment or anger, then we're never going to tap into the right hemisphere. So there's actually a really wonderful book that I just read. It's by Byron Katie. It's called Loving What Is. And she asks these really remarkable 4 questions, which I'm not going to get into here, but I'm going to give you I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of what that whole premise is. And then if you want to go read that book, please, I highly encourage it. So what these 4 questions really embody is bringing you back to reality. Was or is this situation about this person true? Can you know for certain that it's true? And how do you feel when you think about that situation? What happens inside of you? And then really reflecting and turning it around and then seeing how this actually is a reflection of you. Because again, our brains are so smart. We have something called mirror neurons in our body, in our brain. And usually we see in others what's going on within ourselves. And this is kind of a silly example to relate to because it doesn't have to do with the emotion, it has to do with more physical. But the more you watch someone, let's say, play a game of tennis, when you pick up the racket, you would have seen that person playing tennis so often and with so much repetition that you kind of have a good idea of how to play tennis. Now, mind you, you need to learn the skill associated with it, but your mirror neurons have picked up that skill. So you know how to somehow hold a racket, how to hit a ball, the follow through, all those things. Those are your mirror neurons in play. And the same thing goes for emotional. When I see something in another person and I start to make up a story, that's actually me making up that story because that's going on within myself. And that's that mirror neuron phenomenon that I'm talking about. It's that projection. And so this book is wonderful in nurturing and asking these questions to bring us back to reality, to see the whole picture, which is that right hemisphere approach, in order to turn the left hemisphere off, prevent it from going into escape mode and going crazy, and just getting us to be back in the present moment, which is the most important thing, because anxiety is when we live in the future and depression is when we live in the past. But when we live in the present and when we see something just for what it is, black and white, the sky is blue, the grass is green, that is when we will have more stability within our hemispheres and we can turn the left side of the brain to a quieter volume and we can turn the right side of our brain up. And then you'll start to notice that your body is starting to work better for you. Your posture is more upright and more confident and more tall. You're able to logically reason and think without having these interfering low frequency thoughts. And you can be that better person that you want to be because your right hemisphere is more illuminated, it's more active. So that's what the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere do. Now, when it comes to the male and female brain, the way that our signaling in the brain happens is very different. And whenever I say male and female, I mean biologically male and biologically female. So the biological female brain is all about the right and left hemisphere going back and forth, talking, 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 talking. That's why women, when we're asking a man, what are you thinking about? And they say nothing, we can't understand that because we are never thinking of nothing. We are always thinking of something. And to be honest, sometimes it's exhausting. But at the same time, that's how our brain operates. It's this back and forth communication between the right and the left hemisphere. We call it inter-hemisphere communication. And then when it comes to the biological male brain, they're very intra-hemisphere. So their left and right brains, I mean, they talk to each other, but there's a lot of signaling going on within the same hemisphere. That's why when a man is genuinely thinking about nothing, there is a nothing compartment in their brain that they tap into. And when they go fishing, for example, or when they're just chilling with their friends and doing nothing or thinking about nothing, that's very true for them. Whereas women, we love to talk, we love to have coffees and be social and, go for a dinner. Men can go sit on a boat and fish for hours and not say a word. And that's totally fine. But men, they communicate through movement because men are biologically programmed to be active. They are the hunters of the colony. They go out and they're very movement based. So usually when a man is doing something with another man, they're usually playing a game of basketball, going for a round of golf, playing some tennis. They're very active in their social engagements. And that's just because of the way that the brain is wired. And really, when you look at the way that the brain functions, the male and female brain, I don't know how we're compatible by any means, but we are. And that's what makes it so beautiful, is that the opposites attract. So the woman's brain that's always going and the male brain that can stop and literally think of nothing, they are designed to be together for a communal, a team-based survival. Now, this is where things can get a little bit tricky, and that's when we start to see disorders or disease in each male and female brain. So as I mentioned previously, the male brain, if we're in too much of the left brain and it's going into an escape, then we have movement disorder. We have the tremors, we have the Tourette's, Parkinson's, dyskinesis, things like that. And for the female brain, it's more personality disorders. And a lot of the time, when I'm in clinic and I'm looking at my patient's medication list, I'm seeing the woman on an antidepressant and I'm seeing the man on like a high blood pressure or high cholesterol type of medication. And this is when it comes down to another thing that I do in my clinic and with my clients and patients. And I ask, how often do you go on date night? Are you married? Are you divorced? How often do you participate in social engagements? And I will tell you that 8 out of 10 patients, they don't even want to answer that question. They don't see how it's relevant to their health. And I agree. I would be confused. Why am I going to see a chiropractor and she's asking me about my date nights and if I'm married? Like, what the heck? But it has to do with the brain. And if I'm going to help you heal and transform, I need to know, how is your brain being nurtured? How are you nurturing your brain? And so usually when I see a wife on antidepressants or some kind of medication with anxiety or anything like that, I ask, how does your husband support you? And to be honest, a lot of the times they're not very supportive. They just go to work and they come home, but the wife is given the responsibility of doing everything. They also have a job. They have to raise the children. They have to clean the home. They have to cook the meals. They have so much on their plate that their left brain is going insane. And the right brain is not able to even remotely be active to tell the left brain to be quiet because there's so many things that they have to think about and they're not getting the emotional support or the physical support or just any kind of support that they need from their husband or from their partner. And then the same goes for the opposite when it comes to men and women. Usually it's more the latter. The woman does more than the man does. But a lot of the time, men need to be heard. They need to be understood as well. And again, women don't understand how to do that because we're always like, well, what's wrong? Tell me, tell me. Men don't communicate like that. They take your man out for a walk and just let him start talking, because when he goes out for a walk, he will. But the way that the male and female brain interact with each other, although we are designed to be together, we have to also understand how to nurture each other. So if your husband or your male partner likes to go to the gym to exercise, you best believe that he should be going to the gym, because that's how he's going to get out his stress. That's how he's going to nurture his right brain. And if your wife or your female partner likes to go out and hang out with her girlfriends once a week, do not stop her from doing that, because that's how she's going to nurture her right brain. And then when you allow each other and yourself to nurture your brain in these ways of movement and social connection, you will be more present for each other. And your left brain will slowly start to decrease the volume, and your right brain will slowly start to increase its volume. And you'll notice that not only do you have a better relationship with each other, but your bodies are also starting to serve you better. You want to be active together. You want to go on walks. You want to eat healthier. You want to have more community within your family and within your relationship. And that's really the beauty of it all, is when we can live with each other, not in this kind of tension type way, in this way of he doesn't understand me, she doesn't understand me, but it's just a matter of understanding each other, but ultimately also understanding yourself and nurturing your body and your mind and giving yourself permission to embody all of these wonderful things that make you tick and that make you have the best quality of life. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have your health, if you don't have your brain working for you, life is very difficult. And you don't realize how much we take our health for granted until we don't have it anymore. So what I encourage you all to do is to do some more right brain type activities. For all my male followers, go for a run, get a gym membership, and be active. For all my female followers, it doesn't hurt to get a gym membership also. I love going to the gym. But go out with your girlfriends, have social interactions, leave the babies and the kids at home with your caregiver or with your husband or your partner, and have girl time and girl talk, or bring the babies with you and do a stroll with your girls, or have a play date or something, but be with your friends. And then don't forget to nurture the physical body, move, play, interact with the world. Eat healthy foods and fuel your body with whole food nutrients that are going to give you the energy to thrive and survive and function and heal. And then don't forget to just talk to your partner and move with your partner and be with your partner and just really enjoy life with someone else, even if you are single and you are alone. Make friends, be with community, and that will help enrich the right hemisphere of our brain so you can have the best quality of life. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe, follow along so I can keep giving you guys amazing content, and I look forward to seeing you at the next. Take care.